This is a tutorial that will take you through the basics of how to build a mixed reality walking tour of, for example, a school using the GPS zoning system available within Vortals. The starting point for any project is not actually within Vortals. It's actually to make sure that you've designed a system that works correctly. And there are many approaches that you can use for this. You could draw it all out, or you could use a digital program. For example, you could be using Figma. There are a number of different software packages or online systems available, so Figma is not something that we specifically recommend, but it's a good example of what you might need to do in order to actually build a presentation. So this is an example of what you might need to do to actually design your project correctly. This is a prototype system. You see there's no actual images. It's really just a way of laying out your project, laying out the design pattern that you might want to use, adding buttons, and checking the flow of the functionality that you want to use. If you tried to do this within Vortals first, it's much more complex. You get sort of lost in the design layers of all the pretty pictures and all the different slides you're going to create, and you might not actually get a presentation that flows in the way that you need it to, and so you have a poor user experience. This is a really quick and efficient way of building your user experience. Once you're happy with your layout, it's time to start actually designing the slides. Now, these have all been built using Photoshop. There are other photo editors available, and this is actually a very large step that I'm missing out and not showing you. But once you've designed your system and you're happy with all the layouts and the images you've chosen, you can bring it back into Figma and you can actually start laying it out and actually watching it as a presentation. So here I am loading the presentation, and it's just a really quick way of deciding whether or not the flow of the presentation is correct, and if the designs all link together nicely, if the fonts all link together, and you can see that, all right, I'm happy with this, we can move on. Now, the scope of this tutorial is not to try teach you how to use Figma or Photoshop or any of those aspects, only to say that the design process, this part of the process that you're looking at here, is equally, if not more important than the time you'll spend in Vortals, because this is where you make sure that your presentation flows correctly, that your client needs are met, and that the design and the thought that has gone into it actually results in a product that looks and feels like a really good user experience. So even though this is not a big part of the tutorial, this is actually a big part of the process that you need to actually think about very carefully. Now, within the design package that you've got, there's some important things to consider. So this is Photoshop. This is something that I've designed in Photoshop. And if you look carefully, you'll see that everything is in layers. And so now I can actually export all of these layers individually if I want, for loading into Vortals as an image element. But what's important to realize is that I've thought very carefully about the size of this image. If I go to my image size, you'll see that it's only 2000 maximum. On the longest edge of the image is only ever 2000. Anything larger than that, and you risk having a file that takes a long time to load, or something that doesn't actually load on a mobile system. So that's something really important to think about when you start designing your visual elements is, do they exceed the maximum size of what a mobile can actually handle? Any size will work on most PCs, so you won't really notice it on a computer system. But when you put it onto a mobile device, you will start to encounter issues when loading into memory. Now, once I'm happy with all of my design elements, I have now loaded them all into Vortals. And again, the point of this tutorial is not to take you through how to load things into Vortals. We have other tutorials for that. The purpose of this one is the GPS zone system. So to take you through the idea of what this presentation is for, it's basically an augmented reality tour. And the idea is that the user will start here with the school tour, and then we'll have an explanatory page telling them to go look for a tracking image. The tracking image will be located at different locations around the school campus, and they have to walk around and find it. We give them directions and tell them something about the school along the way. And once they find that location, they activate augmented reality. And so once they activate augmented reality, it'll take them to this slide. They're looking for this particular tracking image, and any content that I loaded here will now appear. But we want to create a system where, depending on their geographic location, the content that appears will change. So we want to be able to use the same tracking image in the presentation, and we want to be able to show the user a whole bunch of different contents depending on where they are in the school. But we don't want them to have to think too carefully about the tracking image itself. They don't want to have to think and find a bunch of different tracking plates. They just want to find the one, and every time they see that one, they want to see some new content. And we're going to control that content with a GPS control slide. So in my node editor, I'm going to go to right-click and choose Add GPS Slide. And here I have a GPS slide, and I choose Edit Slide. And what we see here is the GPS map has been designated already. But I want to change where this GPS map is showing. And so I can do that by entering in some GPS coordinates and a zoom factor. And to do that, I can simply go to Google Maps. And so here we have a location that we're choosing. And up in Google Maps, you'll find some GPS coordinates up here and a zoom factor. So this here is the zoom, and these are the GPS coordinates. And all you have to do is copy the two longitude and latitude coordinates, and then take that into Vortals and paste them. And then you can choose your zoom factor. And now you'll see that the GPS map has loaded into Vortals. Now, if you find that this has not loaded in the areas that you wanted specifically, you can either go back to Google Maps, for example, and reload in some coordinates, or you can right-click and choose Top Camera, and now you can actually dynamically change your zoom factor, or with the arrow keys, you can actually move where the GPS map is pointed at. But I'm quite happy with where we were before, so I'm going to move us back to that location. And once you're done, just choose Free Camera again, and that will now stop any motion from the map itself. And now what I want to do is create the zones. And to do that, it's very simple. All you have to do is click Add Zone, and now it enters into the Add Zone mode. And so to add a zone, all I have to do is click points in the map where the boundaries of my zone will be. So let's say I want a zone across all of these particular areas. So I can click here, I can click there, and you can see that the zone is being created dynamically. And so to stop being in the zone creation mode, just right-click. And now you'll see the blue has disappeared, and we now have a zone that we've created. Now, if you're not happy with the location of the zone, you can click and choose to move the vertex points. But that now denotes our zone 1. And if I want to choose to make another zone, I can simply point and click my zones. And I have missed a point, so I'm going to move it along to fix my zone up. Now, once you've created your zone, you cannot re-edit it. And the only way to do that will be to delete the zone and start again. So be very careful when you're in your zone creation mode that you actually put enough vertex points in there and you actually get the zoning system that you want. So I'll add one more zone. Okay, so now this has 3 zones to it. And we want to create content that will appear only when we're in each of these zones. And so we want to create content and then lock it to the particular zone numbers. So to do that, let's go back to our augmented reality slide. And we right-click and we choose Set Visible Zone. And now we have a list of all the zones that we've created, and we can actually set the visibility to Zone 1, for example. And this now means that any content we create will be put into Zone 1. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to choose to load in an image. And actually, correction, I'm going to change that and I'm going to load in a button. So this is a slide button that will take us to a new location. And so this will appear when we're in a particular location in Zone 1. So when we walk around and we enter Zone 1 and we find a tracking plate in Zone 1, we will see this particular object. If we find a tracking plate and we're in Zone 2, this object will not appear. And so let's load in another button. And just a continue tour button. Which will take them to a 2D slide, which will tell them something interesting about the location that they're at. And again, this is locked to Zone 1. So now I want to set some content that will appear when we're in Zone 2. So again, let's go back to our AR slide, and we'll choose Set Visible Zone and choose it to Zone 2. And what you'll see is that even though the content still exists, it has been hidden because now we're editing Zone 2. So we're going to load in another button. I'm going to load in Continue Tour. And again, this is something that will take them to a 2D slide that will tell them something about the new location that they're in. So you can provide them with contextual information about that particular location that they've walked into. But we also want to load in a video. So here's a video of a location that they might have walked into. And this will now play only when you walk into Zone 2. Now, if you accidentally load in content that you didn't want to appear, or you've assigned the wrong zone, or something along those lines, you can, for example, show all the zones, and you can manually assign the zone number. So you see here, we've assigned this to Zone 2. We can change that now to Zone 1, and if I set the visible zone, it now appears in Zone 1, which is obviously not what we want, so I can then reset it to Zone 2 and set our visible zone again. And you can see now it's gone. And so this is a really simple way of building a presentation that is locked to zone systems. It's very quick and it's very flexible, but this is a very new technique and it's not clear exactly how to approach laying it out. This is something that you will have to decide. So when the user walks into a new zone, should they go back to the same augmented reality slide, or do you want to have a different augmented reality slide but with the same tracking plate? There isn't yet a good answer as to how to lay out and choose to connect all of your GPS slides. So for example, in this augmented reality slide, there are 3 buttons that we've created. And these 3 buttons actually span 2 different zones. So maybe it would have been better to create 2 augmented reality slides, one for Zone 1 and one for Zone 2. That will just depend on how you choose to lay out your system. There's no great answer yet. It's pretty much up to you.